Life History Research Paper, Great Plains, NRES 170. Dan Kruger, Student ID 45776178. I'll be interviewing my mother, Diane Krieger, and she lives in Storm Lake, Iowa. Before we begin, I just need to inform you that the interview that I'm doing is for class, and if there are any questions you do not wish to answer, you don't need to.
I understand.
The first part of this will be the life interview questions. What was the house like that you grew up in?
It was a farmhouse north of Storm Lake. It had kitchen, living room, dining room, bedroom downstairs, 4 bedrooms upstairs. It had an oil burner in the dining room. There was no heat upstairs. We had no bathroom. We had to use an outdoor toilet, but it was a great place to grow up.
Well, tell me about your parents. Where were they born? When were they born? What memories do you have of them?
Dad was born in 1912 down in Wall Lake, Iowa. Mom was born in 1919, and I think it was in Crofton, Nebraska.
Mm-hmm.
And they were good parents. Dad was a farmer, and he loved being a farmer. Mom was a farm wife, and she loved being a farm wife. Us kids had a great time on the farm. Mom and Dad worked together. They were always home for us kids. It was a good life. Loved the farm.
Did you have any grandparents that lived nearby?
Did. Grandma and Grandpa Ahart lived in Storm Lake.
Well, where were they born?
Grandma was born out in Nebraska, and Grandpa was born in Iowa.
Well, what do you remember about them?
Oh, we visited them a lot because they were only 5 miles away, sometimes on a Sunday afternoon. But it was fun to go to Grandma's house and Grandpa's house, and Grandma took in boarders at that time. She had an upstairs, and she kept people up there, and she packed lunches for them when they went to work. She fed supper to them when they got home, and they lived in town. We saw them a lot. They were just good people.
Oh, what kind of school did you go to?
Went to a public school, Little Truesdale, Iowa, up to grade 8, and then went to Albert City for high school, grades 9 to 12. Rode a bus.
Now, what was your favorite and least favorite subject?
I didn't like math because I'm not good at math. And I liked, oh golly, I don't know what I liked. I liked English, choir, and band.
Okay. Who were your friends, and who was your favorite teacher?
Oh, well, I had a lot of friends in high school and down at St. Paul, Concordia, Missouri, too. I had a lot of friends down there. Favorite teacher was probably my science teacher. He was a guy from New York City, and he talked like a New York City guy. He had a good personality. It was fun to listen to.
What was most important to your parents?
Making sure us kids grew up knowing right from wrong, taking us to church every Sunday, and they took care of us. It was important to them that we had enough to eat, we had a house to live in, and to know that they loved us and took care of us.
Well, what would have been the 3 biggest news events during your lifetime?
The assassination of John F. Kennedy, the moon landing in Vietnam.
How did you meet your spouse? How did you meet Dad?
Well, I was in the dorm during the week, and there was a phone call for me, so I went downstairs to answer it, and it was Fred calling, and I didn't know who he was, but I had just broken up with another guy, and I didn't have a date, so I said, sure, I'll go out with you. Didn't know who he was, but turned out okay.
Well, how many children did you have?
We had 4 children.
What makes you proud of your children?
I'm proud of my children because they all serve the Lord in their own way.
Well, what do you remember about me when I was born?
You?
Yeah.
Well, I remember you were born in Hastings, Nebraska, and Dad wanted to name you Danny John because he had a boy in his class at one time that was Danny John, and he loved the name. And I remember that you were a real good baby, except when we first brought you home, the guys from church were putting a basement under our house, and it was kind of dusty and sawdusty, and you got a stuffy nose, woke up screaming and crying the first night you came home because you couldnn't breathe.
That was not the best way to start out there.
No, but you got over it.
Well, what's your typical day like now, and how is it different than from what your daily routines were in the past?
Well, I get up.
Okay.
I wake up in the morning and I get up and get dressed and get ready for the day, and it all depends. Some days I have meetings, some days I don't have meetings. In the winter, I'm not as busy as I am in the summer. In the summer, I like to work outside in the flower beds, and I plant tomatoes and flowers, and I like to be outside working. And it's different because years ago when I had kids at home, I focused on the kids, getting them ready for school, whatever they needed to be done to do, I had to do. And I enjoyed it. I was glad to be a stay-at-home mom. I loved it.
Now, what do you see as your place or purpose in life now?
One of the things I do is I go and visit the elderly and shut-ins every week, and I take them bulletins and CDs from our church so that they can listen to the services and visit with them. And if they ask, I pray with them, just checking up, making sure they're taken well care of.
And over time, how have you changed the way that you look at life and at people?
Well, I look at people differently now. I look at people through eyes that ask what I can do for them, how I can help them in any way.
Okay, that concludes the life history interview, and we'll now begin the history of place interview. This will be about the farm where you grew up. And you grew up there starting when you were about 2 years old.
Yep.
And the farm is still there. Nobody lives on it now. But you moved there in 1947, so you've got about 70 years of experience seeing how the farm has changed over the years. Okay, how long have you known about this place, and what changes have you seen there over the 70 years?
Well, I moved there when I was 2 years old, but I have a lot of memories of the farm being a really nice place. The house was well taken care of. There was some improvements made, like there was a bathroom put in. Dad was one of those farmers that wanted his farm neat and clean, so that us kids took care of the yard. We mowed. He raised hogs. He raised cattle. We had chickens. We butchered our own chickens, gathered our own eggs. Us kids had chores on the farm, which was fine. We all kids did at that time. We knew that we had to help out with feeding chickens and gathering eggs and watering hogs, feeding the livestock. We knew we had to help inside the house. We dusted, we cleaned, we did dishes, we did chores, and that's the way we grew up because people worked together.
Okay, can you just tell me what you think about the Great Plains as far as how culture, beliefs, values, how those are important to you and how it applies towards this region of the country?
Family is very important in the Midwest, and going to church, worshiping the Lord, that is very important. It was always important in our family. And when I was a kid growing up, all the families I knew went to church on Sunday mornings. Churches were filled on Sunday mornings because there was nothing else open. There were no stores open on Sunday mornings. And family life revolved around church and around family. It was a good way to grow up.
And to close, just kind of summarize what your childhood was like and contrast it to what you think that us being your kids, what our childhood was like, and now what kids today, how their childhood would be.
Well, we grew up knowing that if we wanted something, we had to work for it. It wasn't just given to us. We worked hard. We saved our money, and if we wanted something, we had to ask Mom and Dad about it first. And they were good parents. They taught us to be responsible. They taught us that if you want something badly, you need to work for it. I don't see a lot of that today. I see a lot of kids with their hands out expecting Mom and Dad to do the work, and they reap the benefits of it, getting what they want when they want. And if they don't, they throw a fit.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and this concludes the interview.